You're listening to The Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Gulseth.
How have congregations been impacted by the storms? And when we think of hurricanes, we generally think Florida, Georgia, a little bit further down the coast. But, the storms had such an impact on our friends in the Carolinas, particularly in Asheville, North Carolina, and so many smaller towns, so many towns around that as well. We're going to get an update on that today. Thanks to Concordia University, Wisconsin for supporting the Coffee Hour. Find out more about Concordia University, Wisconsin at cuw.edu.
Live uncommon.
Joining us today, the Reverend Jeffrey Skopak. He's pastor at Emmanuel Lutheran Church in Asheville, North Carolina. Pastor Skopak, welcome.
To be here with you both.
Looking forward to learning more about your congregation and the community of Asheville, North Carolina. How has Emmanuel Lutheran Church been a part of the Asheville community?
So Emmanuel has been here in Asheville for 120 years, which
a little time.
We tend not to think about Western North Carolina as having Lutheran churches, particularly Missouri Synod Lutheran churches, out here that long. But we have a long history. In fact, if you go just about an hour and a half, 2 hour east, Hickory, St. Stephen's, it appears sent missionaries out here to Asheville. And in between the two of us in Marion, there's a church there that's been there about 90 years. So we've been an integral part of the Asheville Western Mountain communities for a very, very long time.
Tell us about the community of Asheville. I know the name comes up a lot, and some people may have very specific things that they attribute to Asheville, but what is the community of Asheville like?
Sure. Asheville's I use the word eclectic, artsy kind of community. There are those who refer to it as San Francisco in the mountains. I would tell you there is a monicum of truth to that statement. It is a very interesting place. We do have a lot of artisans. We have an area, I should say, called the River Arts District, where artists kind of set up shop, shared studios, sold their artwork. Great music scene here. Excellent food capital to come to. Lots of microbreweries, lots of small distilleries, wineries surrounding the outside Asheville area. It's a haven for tourists because we're in the mountains, the Blue Ridge Mountains. We have the Blue Ridge Parkway. People flock here for the fall foliage, but as well as outdoor living, hiking, camping, kayaking, you kind of name it. It's a place that attracts a very wide base of people, both young and old. We're also an area that has become somewhat of a kind of a hipster retirement community as well. It's kind of hard to put your finger on any one portion of the community. It's so diverse and so mixed.
How have storms like hurricanes impacted Asheville in the past?
Hurricanes don't come here. We live in the mountains. We are hundreds of miles from the ocean. And mind you, my previous 10 years of ministry were served in Jacksonville, Florida, on the eastern coast of the state of Florida. And we had gone through, 3 or 4 hurricanes during my tenure there. Everybody laughed when I moved, saying you're getting away from hurricanes. We never, ever had anything in Florida remotely similar to what befell this little mountain community in Western North Carolina. It's absurd to even think that a storm like this would come here. We have members of our church who work for NOAA, the National Weather People, and they have coined this storm a 1,000-year storm. That Western North Carolina has not seen anything like this in 1,000 years.
That's really incredible. And I know a lot of our listeners have probably seen news footage and all of the videos that showed up on social and all on the news about all of the devastation. What can you explain to us how Hurricane Helene affected Asheville? What kinds of things were you witnessing during this time?
Sure. I would tell you the first thing to understand about this area is Asheville is the largest pin in this mountain map. So people know Asheville, but we are surrounded by just a myriad of smaller towns and communities. So Asheville is about, I guess about 100,000 in population, which makes us the big city, if you want to call it that. But we have many little communities, places like Chimney Rock and Tryon and Hendersonville, Clyde and Waynesville, Marshall and Weaverville, all around us. And that's just touching on a handful of them. Depending on where you were in the storm, really dictates what your experience might have been. I've never really seen anything quite like it. So we had what I would call some of the normal hurricane stuff happen. Lots of wind, lots of water. But the mountains served as funnels for the water. So if you were in low-lying areas, the flood damage was nothing like I had ever seen in Florida. To give you a perspective, 5 minutes from our church, and we sit up on a hill, a pretty high hill, but if you go 5 minutes from us, you'll arrive at the French Broad River. The French Broad River crested at 27 feet above its normal height. So to give that perspective, it doesn't just go up, it has to go out and wide. This was all along the River Arts District, which was totally destroyed, washed away. In fact, one of our members, his mother, has a studio down there. She saw her studio floating down the French Broad River. Buildings were just literally lifted up and carried down river. But if you were up higher, then you had the challenge of wind. So we have a community here in Asheville called Biltmore Forest, and it truly is a forest. It's a beautiful, beautiful community. It is clear that they had kind of micro tornadoes land and step down, because I've never seen trees 80 to 120 feet tall just knocked down in circular patterns in the neighborhood. So one tree fell left, the next tree fell left the other way, and so on. And of course, houses, cars, and the like would be in the way of these massive trees coming down. The third problem we experienced here, because of course we're in a mountainous area, as the water was broadening out these rivers, it began to move earth down the mountains. So catastrophic mudslides hours after the storm, relief could not get to Asheville from the east to the west because Interstate 40 was buried under a 15-foot mudslide that covered the road. The fourth problem we encountered was road failures and bridge collapses because the water was getting under the road beds, causing them to disintegrate and collapse, and of course bridges were getting washed out. You throw all of that together, sprinkle in the loss of power, cell phone towers that went down, so loss of communication, and then finally, loss of potable water because the reservoirs were damaged, most notably the links to 2 out of the 3 reservoirs that feed Asheville. Here we are sitting, how many weeks out from the storm, we still do not have potable water in Asheville. They restored water, so at least you can flush your toilet and the like, but you were on a boil alert. When you take a shower, don't open your eyes, don't open your mouth, get in and out as quickly as you can. So that's kind of been our reality affecting this community. It is nothing like I've ever seen. I've used the words apocalyptic. Storms in Florida involve a lot of flooding and then downed trees. This was different. And it's covering about a 220 square mile area, which is the other part that it's hard to explain this to people who don't live here. So, for example, the village of Chimney Rock is no more. It was a small town of maybe 100 people. The village of Chimney Rock is now in Lake Lure. It literally got washed down the river into Lake Lure. Hard to imagine. It's nothing I've ever seen.
Any idea how many people have been displaced because homes were damaged or washed away?
Oh, right now the count out here is in the thousands. It's been interesting to watch what I would call Western North Carolina creativity and ingenuity. So you have people who are now living on their properties in tents. We work with a ministry in town to distribute items that have been donated to us through organizations like Orphan Grain Train, individual congregations of our church body and the like. But we need to get the stuff to where the people are. So people are living in tents on their property. We're bringing them space heaters that run on either kerosene, gasoline, or propane. The Amish showed up, I think this is really interesting, and built tiny houses for people on their properties. So they're living in these little homes on their properties because their houses are gone. And what people don't understand is FEMA is doing their job. It took them a little while to get on the ground here because of the nature of the terrain. It wasn't easy to figure out where to go. It took them about 10 days to really activate and get working here. Now they've been up and running. But for most people, they don't have flood insurance. We live in the mountains.
Mm-hmm.
So insurance is not covering anything for a lot of these people. So Creativity 101 has sort of emerged out here in how people are working together to figure out housing. Because this is also not a place that is just flush with apartments where people can go live temporarily. The other problem is getting to some of these home sites that have been destroyed. The roads have been destroyed. The bridges have been destroyed. This is kind of an interesting story. About a week ago, we received a number of space heaters and generators. We took them down to the French Broad River. They were loaded on kayaks. They were paddled upstream where they were met by a mule team, and the mule team took them up to a mountain community that has been cut off since the storm.
These are the things you read about in books or see in movies.
Yeah.
This is, wow.
Amazing.
I'll give you another one. We've all kind of laughed about it. They call it the Cajun Navy. I have no idea why they call it the Cajun Navy, but a guy from Louisiana came up here with his goat team, and he has been loading resources onto his goats. Goats are incredibly sure-footed, and he has been hiking up to the communities that have been cut off from the rest of the world with resources. Helicopters have been doing helicopter drops. I mean, it's nothing I've ever seen, to be honest with you.
It's amazing.
Well, we're going to learn more about how Emmanuel has continued to serve their community throughout responding to this disaster. We'll continue our conversation with Pastor Skopak here in just a moment. You're listening to The Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Gulseth.
At Concordia University, Wisconsin, we believe you were created for a reason: to use your God-given gifts to help others, to live a life of self-sacrifice in a me-first world, to live a life that's uncommon. Whether you're taking one of 50-plus online programs or learning with us in person on the shores of Lake Michigan, you'll be equipped to make an uncommon impact. Learn more at cuw.edu. Concordia University, Wisconsin. Live uncommon.
Welcome back to The Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Gulseth.
Today we're learning about disaster response in Asheville, North Carolina with Pastor Jeffrey Skopak of Emmanuel Lutheran Church in Asheville, North Carolina. Pastor, you've certainly created that image in our minds of what the disaster has looked like following Hurricane Helene in western North Carolina, particularly in Asheville and the surrounding communities. That's just devastating. Homes and whole communities being wiped out through flooding and through wind damage as well. You mentioned that your congregation has had the opportunity to serve your neighbors through various acts of mercy. Tell us more about how Emmanuel has been equipped to serve in this way.
Yeah, in the early portion of the days following the storm, first 2 weeks, we mobilized very, very quickly because we have a food pantry network here on campus that serves the community. We serve about 200 families every 2 weeks, food for a week. Well, when the power went out, we had to get rid of everything quickly because no power, no refrigeration. You fill in the blanks of what was going to happen to all the food. So we pivoted very quickly to the distribution of water, cleaning supplies, baby supplies, non-perishable food items. We were blessed with great partnerships of congregations out of our area that brought resources to us. So the first 2 weeks after the storm, we had a distribution in our parking lot that ran from 10 in the morning till about 6:30 at night. We worked with 2 Lutheran emergency response teams that came in that helped with feeding the people. First week, we were serving about 300 meals at lunch and dinner. Second week, it was about 2,000 to 3,000 meals a day. So we have a big shout out to the Forged by Fire guys from Louisiana. It was great. We even had National Guardsmen coming in and eating in our parking lot. But as that was starting to wane, as our immediate neighborhood was getting back on its feet, because we sit up high, we didn't have a lot of damage around us, then we began to transition to being a distribution site, to being a distributor to distribution sites. So now we have been receiving materials and we've been partnering with St. Peter's Lutheran Church in Conover. They're about an hour away from us to the east. They serve as our staging center. They've got 3 tractor trailers now on their campus and 2 pods. So as things are coming in, so we don't get overwhelmed, it goes there. And then I just tell their pastor, Pastor Peter Frank, what we need. And we kind of have this arrangement. They bring stuff over to us, and then we take it out to where it needs to go for distribution. Motivating all of this really comes from a posture of love. We have a great love for our neighborhood, great love for our community here in Asheville. Many of our members, this is where they have lived their entire lives. So serving the neighborhood becomes paramount. Serving the broader community becomes the kind of the bell toll of what we need to be doing as a church. So as we're doing this, we're trying to find what those specific needs are. And it's hard to always guess what's going to be next. You know, in the early days of the storm, it was hygiene kits and flood buckets. We got enough flood buckets to clean up the state of North Carolina, I would tell you. We've transitioned. It's now starting to move towards the colder months. We're up in the mountains. It does get cold here. It does snow here. So now it's been winter coats, hats and gloves, hot hands, portable heaters. It's always hard to kind of guess what's next. The beauty of this in all of this serving, we have had people ask, why are you doing this? And, for us, the simple answer is this is what Jesus would have us do. This is ministry in action. And for some, it's giving us the opportunity to share with them our faith. So it's, this whole notion of love and serve and share kind of coming together in one moment for our entire community.
What has the response been like with the congregation members? How have they been also a part of this response to all of the devastation that's happened all around you?
The thing that really made me just filled kind of with joy was watching our members, as soon as they could get out of their homes, as soon as they could get to the church, they did, and they wanted to know how they could help. I mean, I had members with trees laying on top of their homes, or one family whose second floor apartment got flooded out. If you can imagine, the water crested at 4 feet in their apartment. It was a total loss. And yet here they are showing up on our campus going, what can we do to help others? So we've been able to, by the support, the love, and the care of our partner churches across the Missouri Synod, as well as churches not a part of us in any way, shape, or form, have been giving us financial means so that in turn, where we may not be able to provide new furniture for a family, I can write them a check. And for a family that had to pay for a crane to come in to get a tree off their house, we can help pay for the crane, and so on. So that has been a huge blessing to us. But I've been overwhelmed by how quickly our members were more concerned with others than themselves.
Pastor, what are the needs yet to be met? What is the outlook for the future, and what are those needs that still have yet to be met?
So we've been working closely with Pastor Chris Singer and Lutheran Church Charities, as well as the Lutheran Emergency Response Teams here in Western North Carolina. It's hard to fathom how many trees came down. The one neighborhood I mentioned, Biltmore Forest, they estimate they lost 20% of their trees. Well, these are not little trees, so volunteers have been coming in and doing chainsaw work in these neighborhoods. So that has been a huge help. Obviously, now that we're up against Thanksgiving and Christmas, that will stop for about a month. But the plan is that we'll resume after the first of the year. The second group that has been active on the ground here has been the teams mucking up flooded homes, flooded buildings. So the long term, I would tell you, is going to be not only the cleanup, but the rebuild, because most of these people, in fact, I would venture 90% or more, do not have flood insurance. So just start thinking about the cost of sheetrock, insulation, new flooring. I know the church in Tryon was hit very, very hard with flooding. The cost of putting a church back together or putting a home back together. So as I've been telling people, it's hard to guess what is going to be needed next. Money is very helpful because then we can address things as they arrive. So for example, sheetrock and insulation, if we can't get it donated, we need to go buy it. So that all has a cost. As we're looking ahead, that's where I see the biggest challenge coming. Many have speculated that the cleanup and rebuild for this area is going to be somewhere between 18 to 24 months.
Yeah, it sounds like a long time, and yet the amount of destruction that you've talked about, it seems almost just unfathomable. And yet it sounds like your community, your congregation has really been able to pull together and give the resources and be the hands and feet to be able to bring people back to where they need to be. If people want to be helpful, or if our listeners want to support these efforts in any way, how can they do that?
So there's a couple of ways. The one way is giving directly to the churches here. My church, Emmanuel with an E, Emmanuel Lutheran Church and School, on our church's website has a giving portal set up where they can scroll down and go right to Hurricane Helene storm relief and know every dollar that we receive is going out into the community to help the community. To give you an idea, we recently helped one of our part-time workers in our early childhood. She's a professional artist, which means she works part-time in our early childhood. Her studio is gone. The building literally got washed down the river. Somebody found a piece of her artwork 15 miles away in a tree. They returned it to her. So from our storm grant program that we've initiated here, we were able to write her a generous check to buy new supplies so she can restart her artwork. Another member of our church, their house was destroyed. All of his instruments were gone. He's a professional musician. So we were able to at least give him money to get a new guitar and a new keyboard, just to get back to some semblance of what life was prior to the storm. For the family that lost everything in their apartment, we were able to write them a check for furniture because now they had to look for a new place to live. They need furnishings for the new home. For others, one member watched his place of business get washed down the river. He was sitting there watching the news that he had evacuated, and he noticed the roof of the building floating down the river was where he worked. So he has not been able to work for 7 weeks. So we've been able to assist in offsetting loss due to the storm. It's just stories like that. They're kind of all over the spectrum. So that's one way. A second way, obviously, is giving to LCMS Disaster Response. That will help a broader region. I know they have a lot of efforts focused on Camp Lynn Haven, which received devastating flooding. That'll be a long, long rebuild up there as well. So those are a couple of ways in which you can make an immediate difference in helping the people of Western North Carolina.
Facing such devastation and loss as an individual or as a congregation certainly brings about its challenges. How have you been able to, and the saints there at Emmanuel, been able to bring the love of Christ to those facing this devastation and loss, and to be faithful witnesses and provide spiritual care in those situations?
So by addressing physical needs, it has opened up the door for faithful conversations. We did a spiritual first aid gathering with Lutheran Church Charities. We also had 5 comfort dogs on site for that event, and also had the comfort dogs in our school. We also have a school that goes from infant through 8th grade. We have about 250 kids, and through creativity, ingenuity, and I would tell you the blessing of the Spirit of God, we were the first school reopened in Buncombe County. We were back open 2 weeks after the storm because we have a very creative way in which to supply water to our property. That has allowed us to have opportunities with our parents and with our school families. So that's been a big part of this, is we show and demonstrate our love for this community by serving their physical needs, which has enabled us to have a more open community to talk about our faith, which has really been such a wonderful thing. We're in fact going to come back and do a second spiritual first aid gathering after the new year because many were just not ready 6 weeks out after the storm. But maybe 3 months out after the storm, they will be. So we're not going to stop on that. We're going to follow up and do more of that kind of care for the community.
Pastor Jeffrey Skopak of Emmanuel Lutheran Church in Asheville, North Carolina. Pastor Skopak, thank you so much for sharing this update with us. The Lord bless your work there, and I know that you still have a lot ahead of you in terms of caring for that community. Thanks for being our guest today.
Thank you.
You've been listening to The Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Golseth.
The Coffee Hour with Andy and Sarah is a production of KFUO. To support the Coffee Hour and KFUO Radio, visit KFUO.org. You can also text KFUO to 41444 or send an email to gifts@KFUO.org. And you can call us at 800-844-0524. KFUO. Christ for you, anytime, anywhere.